ask you, were you here at the party yesterday? Yes, no? Well, I really appreciate that all of you are here. I appreciate it even more if you were at the party yesterday or you were drinking and you did it all the way to come here to this early talk. So let's try to make it worth, okay? Uh, what I'm going to talk about here will resonate if you have ever thought about doing agile development. I mean, if you try to deliver features constantly, or if you have ever been in the situation where you wanted to be releasing some fix to a problem that you have detected, but you cannot because you are in the middle of something that is being developed and your main is broken at this moment. Or even if you are already implementing some feature flags in one way or another and you want to hear about alternative implementations of this. So if any of this is appealing to you, I hope that the talk will be something that will provide you with some value. So what I'm going to talk about basically is about feature flags, but in order to agree on what we're doing, I will define them and I will try to explain why, at least for me, they are worth, it is worth to introduce them in the code base. And then I will be talking about how to do implementation in an Android project, and we will do some live coding. It's going to be small because we don't have a lot of time, but we will be implementing a feature flag in a code base. Recap, and you can go at any time, but still I will appreciate if you stay. So let's go with what they are. And basically, I would say that a feature flag is a constant that is used to enable or disable features while they are in the process of being developed. So it is very important that you use these features to protect the changes that you are in the process of doing. And the reason why you want to think about this is because any change that you introduce in your code base is probably about features. Usually we think about features from the user's perspective, about things that the user is going to perceive, that is going to use. But when we talk about features, we will also be able to consider some other stuff. Not only the things that are actually used by the user, but also things that she might not be perceiving as such, like animations or changes in the colors of the buttons or anything like that. Anything is a feature, okay? And when we are trying to develop those, the idea is that we want to have this feature introduced. This is what like when you get to do your developing job, what is the thing that you do first? Probably you have like a Jira ticket, and I'm sorry, I know it's early in the morning, but we do have Jira tickets, and they are awful, but they help us. So we have the Jira tickets, and we start the feature, and probably when you get the Jira ticket, the first thing that you do is you create a branch, and you start coding furiously to sort out the code that you have to introduce in your code base in order to have this feature completed. But as you know, having this feature completed is not something that takes a few minutes, although your manager would like it to be the case. In most cases, it takes longer than that, and in some occasions, it takes a long while to get the feature properly done and ready to be tested. So I would say that this is not the proper way to go, that you have to do something else, something just besides having the code introduced in the branch that you are going to create. Because as you know, creating a new branch is trivial, merging it is not that trivial. So if you want to be agile, you want to reduce the pain of merging branches in your code base. So what we have tried through the years is to improve the branching system. Let me ask you, who is here using Git flow, okay? Git flow, hands up, okay? So if you are using Git flow, you probably have been using several long-lived branches So you have main or master in the past, you have the release branch, you have the hotfixes, and all these branches that even include the feature branches that go out of develop and get back into develop require, if you're doing this with some care and you have a team, you would, they will require some code review. So in order to verify that, hey, you are doing your best, but you can make mistakes. You want to be sure that the code that you introduce in your code base is right, is the thing that you were expecting to introduce. So Git flow has this problem with long-lived branch because when you have a long-lived branch, the merging process gets tougher and tougher the longer the branch lives. So they started introducing GitHub branching, and that comes from the fact of all of us contributing to GitHub projects. So let me ask you again, is anybody here using GitHub Flow? Well, probably, okay, at least one person, thank you. And so there is probably, you have introduced GitHub Flow in some of your products, but you didn't even realize about the change. So the idea here is to make changes shorter, so you just have a main branch and you create a feature branch and you try to merge it as soon as possible. But the truth is that this feature branch can still be long-lived. They allow you to do code reviews of the whole feature, and that's good, but at the end of the day, this separation between the main branch and the feature flags will give you some pain in the future when you want to merge the whole stuff. Finally, the trendy thing, if you are into this, is to use trunk-based development. Or if you're even coming from the cat shows in Paris, you will be using scale trunk-based development, which is nothing more than trying to make the changes as small as possible, so trying to deliver new branches every day, even shorter if possible, so the pain of merging is almost non-existent. That is the goal. But hey, let's be realistic. Merging so often has only some scope that you can address in your code and introduce in the changes in the code base. So chances of you creating the whole change immediately and having that introduced in a few hours are really small, even though management would like them to be this way. So what you do is you have to break your feature into smaller bits and protect it using feature flags. So the idea is that, hey, we cannot do those changes in just a single shot, so let's protect this with a feature flag, and while they are in development, we will be able to disable that code. It will only be visible to us as developers, and everybody else can ignore the fact that this is being done. Then, when the feature is ready, you can enable the flag for your testing team, and so on. You can move this flag onwards to the next teams that are going to use it till it gets to be released. We'll talk about the process later, but the idea is to keep it to yourself while still shipping the whole code base to your users. So it is also important that you will be able to work on other stuff that becomes urgent while you were doing the feature. So having this new fix introduced in your code base is now possible because you just disable whatever you were doing, and then you continue developing the fix for that thing that you have realized that was a problem. It's also important to take into account that some features don't make it to the final version of your application. I don't know if this is the case with you. Maybe if you are doing independent development, then probably. But if you're working in a team, sometimes you get a ticket to do something, they try it, they don't like it, so they remove it. So it is better to have an option to disable it, even though the code is still there. And even if it gets accepted, as we were saying before, we would like to do the progress in a controlled way. So we can move the feature forward to the next team when we want the next team to be able to have access to this feature. So you are going to have all of these, all these teams, all these groups, all these users with a single code base. The idea here is having a single code base that offers all this functionality with no changes at all. You don't have to do changes to the code base because otherwise you don't know if you're producing the same product. And then you are not controlling the process of development. So I hope the idea is clear, but I think it will be even more clear if we explain how to do that in an actual project. So things should be very simple. You just have to use a constant, and the constant will be enabling the new code. And if there was any previous code, if there was a previous implementation of this feature that you are introducing at the moment, then it will be in the else part of this if. So that shouldn't be an issue for anybody here. You are quite beyond that. So the code should be trivial. The problem here is how to organize that, how to put that code in the same code base and still be able to produce the different versions that each team is going to be using. So the idea is that you have to put the logic in the code, not in the feature flags. So I have seen teams that use configurations as feature flags. A very common example is if you're using a couple of web servers or services that you are getting data from. So you have like the production one and the development one. And the development one, you just put the configuration for which one you are using in this code base, and based on that, you decide whether there's some feature is enabled or disabled. My advice is not to do that. I would recommend to do the other way around, to do this the other way around, which is define if you are doing some change to that, and the feature flag will use one configuration or the other based on your needs, okay? So feature flags should be really simple, just true or false. Don't put any additional stuff because it will complicate the code that you're trying to read, okay? So the idea should be clear. Now let's talk about where in the project we could put these feature flags. So the requirements for these feature flags that we're going to use is that we're going to generate a different product for different audiences using the same code base. So, and keep in mind that at the beginning, I said that they were going to be constants. So we are not using variables to enable or disable that. It can do that, and we can talk about that later, but pure feature flags should be constant because if you're using the compiler properly, some of the code will be removed from your code base when it is not being used, okay? So how does it work? Well, I introduce them, and let's say that I have these 4 teams. Probably you may have more in your organization. Maybe if you are a single developer, you are just yourself and you think this is too complicated. I will talk about you in a moment. But if you're doing the development yourself, then the alpha is what you want to have. I mean, you have access to the features that are at this moment being developed. So you introduce the feature flag and you start coding it. When the feature is ready to be tested, you enable it for the QA team. The QA team now will be able to access that feature, the newer version of whatever it is, and use it and test it properly. But the rest of the, in this case, beta testers and the release will not have access to the feature yet. When the internal test has been conducted and it has passed, I mean, like everybody's happy internally with whatever we have created, then we enable it for our trusted users, the beta users, or whatever you want to call them. And then when that is also accepted, we will move it on to the next stage, which is release. Keep in mind that there's one more stage, which is very important. You have to keep your house clean, but also your code base clean. So you will have to do some cleanup, and when things have already settled down, you should go and remove whatever code is not needed anymore. That is very important. If you are a single developer, and this seems like too ambitious for your code base, you can still do this. I mean, like you can have debug and release and enable the feature flags for yourself while still being able to send fixes to your users. that is still possible. You don't need that many stages because you don't have that many people in your team, okay? But the same thing applies. So my advice in order to implement them is to use Gradle, and my implementation is using build variants. So you use different build variants. You know that you already have by default in your Gradle build file, you have two build variants. One is silent, but it's there. It's an implicit one, which is the debug one, the one that you're running all the time when you run your application while developing. And the other one is there, and it seems to be broken because the signature is initially not there, but this is the one that you finally release to the Play Store. So you use these build variants with different files, not with different variables. We will talk about the code in a moment. And please don't use build flavors. Build flavors are meant for something different. They are meant to, if you want to use, for example, a paid app and a free app that has an in-app purchases, for example. That is a good situation, including different objects, different things that you may define for the different versions of your application. That is suitable for that, but is not the best option for feature flags. Oh, sorry about that. And you can use application suffix ID if you want to, application ID suffix, if you want to run several versions of the same application in the same device. That sometimes is something that is useful because you can have like access to the production one and still run on the same device another one, like the one that you are developing at the moment. However, keep in mind that if you do that, the data is attached to the ID, which means that you will have to have some strategy in order to migrate the data from the previous version to the next version. Okay, so beta transitions to the next, to the production one are not straight, okay? If you have ever tinkered with your build Gradle, which is probably it's probably something that all of us have done at some time, you will probably be familiar with this. This is tiny, but bear with me. This is the Android part of your build Gradle for your app module. And inside of that, you have, like we were saying before, the build types, which is, I don't know why they call it build types here and build variants in the description, but hey, this is how it is. So build types are build variants, and we have the release one defined there by default, as we said before. So what I would say is you also have the debug one, that was the implicit one, the one that you are running all the time, and we can call that alpha, the things that we are developing at that moment. Then we will have QA. QA, in this case, I'm going to just introduce this single stage in order to show you how it works, but we will define QA so it is debuggable and it has the same signature as debug in this case, just for the sake of simplicity, okay? And we could, in each of these build variants, we could define a property that is going to be defined using a generated file for each of the build variants. And you could do that, but my advice is not to. Why? Because as it gets more complicated and you introduce more feature flags, which you will probably have a few if you have a big project and a big team, this becomes a mess. Not only that, it becomes harder to track the changes that you have introduced in the build process. And sometimes you want to know if anything changed in your build process. You don't want this to be something that changes every time with any other reason than to introduce a new feature flag. So please, don't put them there. I would rather recommend to use different files for that. So you know that by default, your different build variants share a source main Java directory for their source set. So that is where your source code is generally created by default. And if you have never played with build variants or build flavors, this is what you have there and where your code is probably located at. But you are also enabled by using the feature flags to have other directories. And our goal is to have this feature flag file in a way that we can have different values for different build variants. So don't put anything in the common one, in the one that you are used to put stuff. Rather, use the other directories in order to have different versions of your feature flags. So we're going to have different copies of our feature flags file, so they can be shared only by the corresponding build variant. So we will have one for the bug, we will have another one for QA, and another one for release in this case. That is, and I will do some live coding in a minute, how we can implement that. But the idea here is that we talk about some scenarios and how to cover them. And I'm going to cover only 3 basic scenarios, but they are very commonly applicable to everything that you do in an application. So the most common one, and the one that we immediately think about when we start talking about feature flags, is when you want to change some logic in your application, or you want to implement in a different way some layer of your application, let's say persistence, which will be the case here. So in this case, you will see that it is trivial that you will be putting in your domain code or in your layer code for that feature. You will be using the feature flag in order to enable that. But people usually think, okay, this is very easy, but I don't know what to do with Windows, with views, with anything that is related to the user interface. And it is not different at all than what we have mentioned so far. If you make a minor view change, you only have to do, if let's say that you're using Compose, and I have an example later, you will use an if to say, hey, this is the version that I want to show when the feature flag is enabled, this is the version that I want to show when it is not. But if you're not using Compose yet, and you don't regret it, and you still want to be continuing with your development, you can load a different XML depending on whether you want to go with one version or the other. Same thing applies when the change to your UI is major, when you have different data exposed, when you have different views that are consuming different data from your view models. But then my advice would be to use routing. And I will show you a snippet of code after the live coding that I will be doing. So let me stop the presentation and let's go with the, oh, it's going to be hard. Okay, so I hope you can read this. So this is an application that I have created for the purpose of this demonstration, and it is going to be built and run. It's trivial, it's a mood logger. So the purpose of this application, we have been going through the pandemic. Our mood is not always constant, so we want to know when we were happy, when we were sad, when we were neutral. And what we're going to do here is just basically keep track of our mood. So when I want to add something to, let me show oh, here it is. So when I want to add a new mood to my log, I will just click on the plus button and I will choose whether my mood is happy, neutral, or sad. I'm very happy because I'm with all of you here, and it will get tracked. Trivial, okay? So now I am told to upgrade my application. It's been doing the storage locally. I want it to be able to sync between devices, and I am a mobile developer advocate for Realm. So I know that Realm is a better option to implement persistence and to have the persistence introduced in my application. So let's do that. What I'm going to do here is to use the build Gradle file that I was mentioning before, the one for the app. I have opened it here, and as you can see, the release one is already there, and what I'm going to do is to introduce the QA one, okay? Oh, by the way, I forgot to do something very important, that is create a new branch. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm not going to do that. First step, you will be creating the branch. Second step, you will introduce the feature flag. Once I have that, I will be syncing the Gradle. so it knows about this new build variant that I have just introduced. And I will go to the project view here. And as you can see here, this is where my source code is living now. It has like 3 big folders. One is for the main source code. The other 2 are for the tests, your espresso test and your unit test. You know that better than me. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new folder, and this is going to be a folder, and it's going to be a new Java folder, okay? So you can see here that I have the option in this picker to have the main, the one that is being used by default, the debug, which I'm going to create now, and I'm going to create one for each one of the different build variants that I have created. So let's go with folder, Java again, and I'm going to introduce the QA to follow the order. And again, a new one, folder, Java. It's a little bit tedious, but pretty easy. And I'm going to introduce the release one. So as you can see here, now we have different folders. Each one of them contains the Java folder inside. The next thing that I'm going to do is to create a package in each one of them, the same package that I was using in the original one. It could be another one, but for the sake of this demonstration, we're going to use the same one, and I'm going to start with the debug one. So I'm going to create a new package. In this case, this is going to be com mongodb mood logger. And now that I have that, I'm going to create a new class that is going to be calling class, and I'm going to call, surprisingly, feature flags. I know you were not expecting this. So, yeah, I want to add that. And here, I told you that I was going to be using constants. So what I'm going to have here is a companion object which will be defining a constant that will be related to my usage of real. So I will define that as, true. Okay? I have defined my first file with the constants. What do I do next? Well, I need the same thing on the other 2 build variants. So instead of going and defining that, I'm going to go here and ask it to open this folder in the Finder, and hopefully, if I, come on. Okay. Let me try again. So open in Finder. Oh, and it is opening on the other window. So let me just to move this window here. And what I'm going to do is go to the debug one, open the QA one, and I'm going to copy this. I know that this seems to be not so painful, but it is, okay? So bear with me. And I'm going to have this one here too. And that should be it. So let's get rid of this one. And hopefully we now have in the QA, didn't I get it right? Release, got it right. I didn't get the okay, I will go with QA, with debug and release only. So the idea here is now that you modify your code so you make this work. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is to go to the main activity that I have here, and my goal would be to introduce a different repository, one with Realm, the other one, which was the previous implementation without it. So I'm going to use a different implementation in each. Actually, I'm going to use the same implementation and a different println to have this, and I'm going to use feature flags and real. Then I will go with the default one, and here I will go with the alternative one, the previous one. My implementation is going to be, as I said, the same for each one of them. So, and the only difference is that I expect to have a different println with this thing here and this thing here. So when the feature flag is on, I will be using the repository with rel. When the feature flag is off, I will be using my previous repository, which could be room, could be an in-memory repository, as it is the case here, or whatever implementation you had in the past. So the last thing that I would like to do is to run this using different build variants. So in order to do that, I'm going to select build variant, and as you can see here, I have this new panel here, and I can choose between the three of them. So let's make sure that we have the proper values here. In this one, that is the one that I created first, which is the debug one, I want to have this enabled, and in the release one, I'm going to obviously disable this one. Okay? So that should be it. I'm going to run the first one. I do have a search here in the log for Realm, and unless I've made a mistake, which is very likely because coding in your back is almost impossible, I will be having Realm enabled, and if I choose the release one and run it again, and run it again, what did I do wrong? Sorry? You need to specify assigning config. I need to specify what, sorry? Assigning config. Oh, I did it all, yeah, totally. That's what I wanted to have so let me move this to QA and refactor. Totally. So let me go with QA. Yeah, problems of doing this in front of people. So hopefully we will have this running, terminated, and Realms should not be enabled. Didn't I change that? Did I have this running? Sorry about that. QA. Oh. It is true and it should be false. Okay. So now we should have this disabled. Okay. So the idea is that using the same code base, and sorry for the technical difficulties with the implementation, not enabled now, you should be able to have a different implementation of the, where is my mouse? Just a second. Here we go. Of these feature flags. So you are able to run one thing and not run it for a different group using the same code base. So if you want to try this, both the initial code and the final version are available at this address. And regarding the snippets that I mentioned before, you have the minor UI change, And here you can see that you have an if with a feature flag using a different composable for the different purposes that you have. So you can enable a single one, show how it behaves, or disable it for the other versions. Same thing happens with the major UI change, but then I would recommend you to use different routing. So if you use the routing module of the architecture components, you will be using a different route to go to your destination when the feature flag is enabled. And that's most of what I wanted to tell you. I think that if you plan to do this, I would recommend you to have tests in place, but it's not mandatory. I'm like, even if you're not using tests, this is useful. Keep in mind, I didn't say don't use tests. Do use them, okay? What I'm saying is don't make the fact of you not having tests an excuse for not using feature flags. That shouldn't be the case. You can go with feature flags and without any tests at the moment. But my advice is to introduce unit tests as soon as you can. Love yourselves and your team and have avoid yourself any spits on your coffee for the future. So that was it. That was everything I wanted to do. One more thing regarding the test. If you do the testing, you want to test both scenarios. So you will also be using the feature flags to say, with this feature flag enabled, this is what I want to test. With this other scenario, which is the feature flag disabled, I want to test this other behavior, okay? So you will have, for the same part of the code, probably more than one test, the one with the feature flag enabled and the other one without the feature flag enabled. So, as promised, this is all. What I want to remind you about is that I believe that feature flags will allow you to be more agile and to make commits to your code base sooner, and then reduce the pain of having all these commits merged into your code base. So that is the whole purpose of it. You can react to change in priorities in your code base. You can evolve the code without any other disruptions to any other parts of the code. And you can tune up development while you're doing it. The implementation, I believe, although I had a few problems because I was coding on my back, I believe that is trivial. I'm sorry, I could have done this smoother, but I don't want you to leave the room thinking that this is any difficult, because it is not. And you can use the build variants as we were mentioning before, but you can also have a different implementation, which would be to enable them remotely. That's a totally different story. We can talk about that. You can reach me at the booth downstairs at the Realm booth. But the idea here is we're talking about being agile. The other thing is being able to turn on and off things remotely. Completely different. It might be also useful, but that's a totally different story. If you do this, if you enable and disable things remotely, please keep in mind that reviews depend on the code that you enable. So you should tell the store that you have both possibilities in your code in order to do that. And I believe that you can use feature flags not only for logic or for implementation of your layers, but for everything within your project. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I will be more than glad to try to answer them. If you have questions later, I will be downstairs.